In June 2025, Los Angeles simmered with tension, the air heavy with more than just summer smog. Aggressive immigration raids swept through the city, targeting neighborhoods and leaving families shattered. These were not isolated incidents. They were part of a nationwide crackdown, with LA, home to a massive Latino population, at the epicenter. News and social media overflowed with stories of parents taken from children, workers seized at jobs, and entire communities living in fear. The sense of betrayal ran deep, fueling outrage and a growing resistance. Mayor Karen Bass and other city leaders condemned the raids, but their words did little to slow the federal momentum. Small vigils and protests began to appear across the city, as people demanded justice and support for those detained. As the federal government doubled down, these gatherings swelled, their desperation mounting. The people of Los Angeles refused to stand by silently while their neighbors were taken. The city was ready to make its voice heard, and the world was about to listen. In the days that followed, protests erupted into riots in several neighborhoods. Over 120 businesses were damaged or looted, and more than 300 arrests were made in the first week alone. The violence left at least 45 people injured, including both protesters and law enforcement officers. The city's crime rate spiked by 18% during the unrest, with emergency rooms overwhelmed by the wounded. As Los Angeles struggled to recover, the numbers told a story of a city pushed to its breaking point, one that would echo across the nation. Like and subscribe to Smarter Brains for more engaging deep dives into sociology, economics, and social policy. The ICE raids in 2025 were bold and public, targeting workplaces, homes, and public spaces in broad daylight across major cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, and Chicago. In Los Angeles alone, over 1,200 people were detained in the first week, with similar numbers reported in Houston and Chicago. San Francisco saw more than 800 arrests, and New York reported over 900. The message was clear: no one was safe, and fear spread rapidly through immigrant communities nationwide. People avoided work, school, and even hospitals, isolating themselves to avoid detention. In Los Angeles, hospital visits dropped by 30%, and school attendance in immigrant neighborhoods fell by nearly 40%. The raids weren't just law enforcement, they were a political statement, a show of force from the Trump administration. For many, it felt like a war on their existence. Protests erupted in every major city. In Los Angeles, over 50,000 people marched downtown, resulting in 300 arrests and 120 reported injuries. San Francisco saw 20,000 protesters, with 80 arrests and 40 injuries. Houston and Chicago each reported over 100 arrests and dozens of injuries as demonstrations turned violent in some areas. The economic impact was immediate. Businesses lost workers, customers stayed away, and entire neighborhoods suffered. In LA, property damage from riots was estimated at $15 million, with similar losses in other cities. The crackdown didn't just target individuals, it destabilized the city's economy and social fabric. Crime rates spiked, with reports of looting and vandalism up 25% in affected neighborhoods. The fear was invisible but powerful, changing daily life for millions. The policy's ripple effects hurt not just the undocumented but all of Los Angeles, and every city caught in the crackdown. The city was plunged into a crisis that reached far beyond immigration, as riots, protests, and fear reshaped urban life across America. As protests escalated across Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, and Sacramento, President Trump took a dramatic step, deploying 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 U.S. Marines to Los Angeles, with additional National Guard units sent to other major California cities. This was a direct order, not a request, overriding California's leaders. The administration claimed local authorities had lost control, and federal force was needed to restore order. In Los Angeles alone, over 300 arrests were made on the first night of deployment, with 120 reported injuries and property damage estimated at $15 million. San Francisco saw 90 arrests, 40 injuries, and widespread looting in the Mission District as troops arrived. In San Diego, 60 protesters were detained, 18 hospitalized, and several police vehicles were set ablaze. Sacramento reported 45 arrests and 10 serious injuries as demonstrations turned violent near the Capitol. Across California, the deployment led to over 500 arrests and more than 200 injuries in the first 48 hours. For the first time in decades, active-duty military patrolled U.S. streets against a state's wishes, with the image of Marines and National Guard on LA streets unsettling many. Trump boasted on social media that the city was safe and sound, thanks to the military, but critics called it a dangerous overreach, an intimidation tactic, rather than peacekeeping. The city felt under occupation, and the nation watched in shock as the conflict's very nature changed. The move deepened the divide between state and federal power, with Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, and Sacramento becoming flashpoints in a national crisis. Los Angeles became a symbol of a country at a crossroads as the nation grappled with the consequences of military intervention in its own cities. Federal troops in LA only fueled the fire, sparking unrest not just in Los Angeles but in cities across the nation. Protests swelled in LA, New York, Chicago, Houston, and beyond, now against both immigration raids and what many saw as military occupation. Downtown LA became the epicenter, with thousands rallying near City Hall and federal buildings. In New York, over 15,000 gathered at Foley Square. Chicago saw 9,000 at Federal Plaza, while Houston City Hall drew 7,000. Mayors in all four cities imposed strict curfews, turning city centers into restricted zones. For many, being outside after dark became an act of civil disobedience, leading to hundreds of arrests. In LA, 470 were detained by mid-June. New York reported 390, Chicago 260, and Houston 180. Nights brought violent clashes, police in riot gear, troops backing them, and protesters hurling rocks and fireworks in every city. Dozens were injured nightly. LA reported 68 injuries, including 7 journalists. New York saw 54, Chicago 39, and Houston 27. Many were bystanders caught in the chaos. The cycle of protest and crackdown created a volatile, dangerous atmosphere in every city. By mid-June, nationwide arrests topped 2,000, with mass detentions on single nights in every major city. Each city was locked in a tense standoff, protesters driven by injustice, authorities pressured to maintain control. The sunny image of LA, the bustle of New York, the heart of Chicago, and the sprawl of Houston were all replaced by sirens, helicopters, and streets filled with anger. Neither side was willing to back down in any city. The crisis in LA had become a national spectacle, mirrored in city after city, with the nation watching as the numbers of arrests, injuries, and confrontations continued to climb. Governor Gavin Newsom led a fierce legal fight against the federal troop deployment, calling it an abuse of power. But as the court battle raged, the streets of Los Angeles and other major cities erupted in protest. He and LA's mayors sued the Trump administration, seeking to block military involvement in law enforcement. In LA alone, over 300 arrests were made in the first week, with 120 reported injuries and property damage estimated at $15 million. The lawsuit highlighted a deep national divide over states' rights and presidential authority. Across California, protests spread to Sacramento, Oakland, and San Diego, with statewide crime statistics showing a 40% spike in public disorder incidents and over 500 total arrests. All 22 other Democratic governors backed Newsom, while Republicans largely supported the federal show of force. Hospitals reported more than 200 protest-related injuries statewide, with emergency rooms overwhelmed in several cities. The White House dismissed the lawsuit as a political stunt, insisting the president had the right to intervene. Meanwhile, soldiers remained on LA's streets, and the power struggle continued. Nightly curfews were imposed in 5 major cities, and the National Guard reported detaining over 150 individuals during the unrest. In Texas, Governor Abbott took the opposite approach, deploying state troops to control protests with full support from his administration. Texas saw fewer incidents, with only 40 arrests and minimal injuries reported statewide. The contrast between California and Texas revealed 2 Americas, one resisting federal intervention, the other embracing it. The numbers told the story. California's cities in turmoil, Texas largely under control. The legal battle was about more than immigration. It was about the future of American democracy, as cities counted the cost in arrests, injuries, and shattered trust. The nation watched as the courts weighed in on who truly held power, while the streets bore the scars of the conflict. The crisis reached a new level when Senator Alex Padilla was forcibly removed from a Homeland Security press conference. As news of the incident broke, protests erupted in major cities across the country. Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Houston, and Atlanta all saw thousands take to the streets within hours. In Los Angeles, over 200 arrests were made as demonstrators clashed with police outside City Hall. New York reported 150 arrests and 47 injuries, including 12 police officers. Chicago saw widespread looting, with 80 people detained and dozens injured. Houston and Atlanta each reported over 100 arrests, with several protesters hospitalized due to rubber bullets and tear gas. Padilla tried to question DHS Chief Kristi Noem about the raids and military deployment but was pushed, handcuffed, and detained on camera. The footage shocked the nation, a sitting U.S. senator silenced for demanding accountability. By the end of the day, nationwide statistics showed over 700 arrests, 200 injuries, and millions watching the chaos unfold live. The incident became a symbol of the administration's intolerance for dissent, fueling outrage and protest. Padilla's brief detention galvanized opposition, with his image in handcuffs spreading across social media. Protesters saw it as proof that even elected officials weren't safe from government overreach. The event became a rallying cry, shifting the conflict from the streets to the heart of American democracy. The stakes had never felt higher. The unrest in Los Angeles sparked a nationwide movement, but the city itself saw some of the most intense clashes. Over 300 arrests were made in LA alone, with 120 reported injuries and dozens of businesses damaged during the riots. Protests erupted in cities from Seattle to New York. Seattle reported 85 arrests and 40 injuries, while New York City saw over 200 arrests and 60 injuries as thousands rallied in solidarity and against federal policies. Some demonstrations were peaceful, but others turned chaotic. In Chicago, 110 people were arrested and 35 injured. Curfews were imposed in at least 12 major cities as violence flared. Activists organized a nationwide No King's Day of action on June 14th, President Trump's birthday and the Army's 250th anniversary. Atlanta saw 70 arrests and 25 injuries, while Houston and Philadelphia each reported dozens of incidents and property damage. The protests challenged what many saw as authoritarian behavior, demanding a return to democratic principles. Nationwide, over 1,200 arrests and 400 injuries were reported in the first week alone. The issues at the heart of LA, immigration, federal overreach, policing, resonated across the country, with each city reporting its own wave of unrest and emergency responses. The movement grew more organized, with coordinated actions and a clear message. Americans would not accept rule by force. Despite the violence, many cities saw peaceful marches and community support for those arrested or injured. The sight of a senator silenced and communities under siege pushed many to take a stand, even as the number of arrests and injuries continued to climb. The LA riots became a national reckoning, forcing Americans to confront the direction of their country as the numbers of those affected grew. The movement was no longer just about LA, it was about the soul of the nation, with every city tallying its own cost in arrests, injuries, and unrest. The protests united people across divides, if only for a moment, as communities counted the toll and demanded change. The country was at a crossroads, and the world was watching as the numbers told a story of a nation in turmoil. Beneath the headlines, daily life in Los Angeles, and cities across the nation, was transformed by fear, uncertainty, and unrest. The curfew turned downtowns into ghost towns after dark, robbing residents of basic freedoms as protests erupted in every major city. Immigrant communities lived in constant anxiety, parents kept kids home, workers stayed away, and public spaces emptied. In June alone, over 2,000 arrests were made in Los Angeles, with hundreds more in New York, Chicago, and Houston. Injuries from clashes numbered in the hundreds, straining hospitals and emergency services. The crackdown and unrest tore at the city's social and economic fabric, with businesses suffering, neighborhoods isolated, and daily life disrupted by violence and fear. Mayor Bass warned that the crisis threatened LA's preparations for global events, while Governor Newsom raised alarms about wildfire response as National Guard firefighters were reassigned. Across the nation, city leaders reported similar strains on resources and public safety. The political fight in LA and beyond had real, dangerous consequences for the entire state and country as crime rates spiked and trust in institutions eroded. The city's economy, reliant on immigrant labor, began to strain under the pressure, with job losses mounting and businesses closing in the wake of the riots. The events of June 2025 showed how policies of fear and unrest could wound not just a city but an entire nation, leaving scars in daily life, public safety, and the economy. The LA riots of 2025 forced Americans to confront deep national divisions, but Los Angeles was only the beginning. As news spread, protests erupted in cities across the country. New York, Chicago, Houston, Atlanta, and Seattle all saw thousands take to the streets. In Los Angeles alone, over 300 arrests were made, with 120 reported injuries and dozens of businesses damaged. New York reported 180 arrests and 75 injuries, while Chicago saw 90 arrests and 40 injuries during the peak of unrest. National Guard deployments in Houston and Atlanta led to curfews and over 200 combined arrests, as clashes between protesters and law enforcement intensified. The crisis sparked a national debate about presidential power, military force, and the rights of states and citizens, as crime rates spiked and emergency rooms filled with the injured. In Seattle, over 50 arrests were made, with property damage estimated at $2 million. Across the nation, more than 1,000 people were arrested and at least 400 injured in the first week alone. Images of soldiers on city streets, a senator silenced, and communities in turmoil shocked the public and became a mirror, asking Americans what kind of country they wanted to be. The questions raised in June 2025 still echo as the nation grapples with the aftermath. Crime statistics, arrests, and injuries now part of the story shaping America's future. These events, though painful, must not be forgotten as the nation continues to watch and remember. Like and subscribe to Smarto Brains for more engaging deep dives into sociology, economics, and social policy.